You know, it's nice to live in a town with a winning team. In a very real way, my formative years took place against the backdrop of the 1990s Chicago Bulls. The Bulls dominated the decade in which I graduated from high school and graduated from Z Cavarici pants, Baruch Hashem. If you don't know what those are, Google them after Shabbos, and then try not to associate them with me. I matriculated to the University of Wisconsin during those years. While at Madison, I sat in my dorm common room and watched the Bears lose every single game, 2 games a season for 4 years, to the Green Bay Packers. You may not. So I just want to notice that. So you might think that Wisconsinites are nice. They're not. At least not when it comes to their rivalry with the Bears. Ask Shira during Kiddush lunch what a fib is, but ask her quietly away from the kids. Thank God we Chicagoans had the Bulls, who had back-to-back-to-back championships between 91 and 93, and a second three-peat after Jordan returned from 96 to 98. I would come home to the flatlands of Illinois to find Bulls fever. The city was electric and proud. One building of the just off the Kennedy Expressway downtown sported a giant mural of renegade former Pistons rival Dennis Rodman. The best part was that every time you drove downtown, Rodman's hair color had changed both atop the mural and in real life. My family wasn't wealthy. We couldn't afford Bulls tickets all that often, which were hard to come by anyway. But a couple of times, a client of my dad's threw him some tickets. And on those rare occasions, we drove down to the West Side, to the United Center, and watched the Bulls work their magic. You arrived on time, not wanting to miss the house lights go out, the spotlights flare, the synthesized music blasting on full tilt. And now, introducing your world champion, Chicago Bulls. Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Steve Kerr, and the incomparable Michael Jordan were among the best in history. And yes, Air Jordan really did seem to fly, soaring toward the basket or executing a fading jump shot as if gravity didn't quite apply to him. With each incredible feat, a Pippen assist, a Rodman block, an unlikely Kerr three-pointer, the crowd would erupt with cheers. The United Center will always be, for me, a place of joy. The years since Michael Jordan and the Michael Jordan era have been decidedly less joyful for Bulls fans. So watching the Democratic National Convention this week, it was striking how, given the political climate of the past 8 years or so, there was a palpable sense of joy filling the stadium. I want to speak to you about joy today, not so much to express my own feelings about the DNC or thoughts about candidates, though of course I have them, but to consider this emotion which seems to have caught so many of us off guard, as if we thought an American political muscle had atrophied, only to suddenly find out that it hadn't really. Which I guess makes sense, because joy is at its best, at its most powerful, when it surprises us. Consider today's Haftorah, which ends, "Truly the Lord has comforted Zion, comforted all her ruins. God has made her wilderness like Eden, her desert like the garden of the Lord." And then, "Sason v'simcha imatzeva, todah v'kol zimra." Gladness and joy shall abide there, thanksgiving and the sound of music. Here is a community in exile, a people bereft of their holiest site, their land, their autonomy. They are in the throes of despair, of grief. And here comes Isaiah to remind them all is not lost. The fight continues. The dawn may be breaking. Joy for Isaiah is not the cure for grief, but its resolution. I think that a big piece of the joy pulsating through the United Center this week, it was about that. This is a party which until a month ago was feeling pretty bereft, hamstrung by their circumstances and terrified of November. Whether the new circumstances will yield their desired results, I don't know, of course. But the joy of this past week feels very much like both a yearning for and expression of not just hopefulness, but an emergence from certain loss to possibility. Victory is possible, those delegates seem to understand, but so is defeat. The relationship between joy and grief is well established. In the Bavli, in Masachet Megillah, we're told Rabbi Levi said, and some say it was Rabbi Yonatan, quoting the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah, the men of the great assembly, anywhere that the word Vayehi is stated, it is an ominous term indicating nothing but grief. Why this word Vayehi? And it was because in Leviticus 9 it says Vayehi b'yom hashmini Kara Moshe la'aron u'levanav u'leziknei Yisrael. On the 8th day, Moses and Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. This verse marks the dedication of the Mishkan, surely a joyous occasion of the highest order. So why grief? The Talmud reminds us, Ha shechev Nadav ve'Avihu. It also sets in motion the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's sons, who tragically die after bringing Eish Zarah, strange fire. But the Gemara continues, there are all kinds of instances where Vayehi introduces other joyful moments. Rather, Rav Ashi said, Chol Vayehi ikahachi ve'ikahachi. Vayehi sometimes means joy, and sometimes means grief. So I think there are two ways to understand this. The simplistic way is that some days are good and some days are bad. Okay, true, but that's not much of a chiddush. It's not really so novel. The more sophisticated way to understand the Talmud's point is that joy and grief are fundamentally linked. There is not really joy without the experience of, memory of, or possibility of grief. Joy is not about unadulterated happiness. It's about finding uplift when the currents are pushing downward. Each game during those years, during the 90s, brought highs and lows, setbacks and successes. Game 6 of that 6th championship, the Bulls were tied with the Utah Jazz with less than a minute left on the clock. But then Karl Malone passes to John Stockton, who hits a three-pointer with 42 seconds on the clock, and things are looking actually pretty bleak. What happens? Of course, Michael Jordan happens. In his last game ever with the Chicago Bulls, with the inbound from Pippen, makes a quick layup, then strips the ball from Malone, then travels the length of the court, faking out Brian Russell at the top of the key, and drains a perfect J with 5.2 seconds left on the clock. Stockton misses, Jordan finishes with 45 points, and the rest is history. That was an away game, but my point is that joy enmeshed with uncertainty during the 1990s at the United Center presaged the same kind of joy that was on display at last week's GNC. J.D. Salinger wrote, the most singular difference between happiness and joy is that happiness is a solid and joy is a liquid. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs explains what he thinks Salinger means. Happiness is something you pursue, but joy is not. It discovers you. Perhaps this is why our tradition links joy with service. Our Parsha tells us that we are to serve God by walking in God's ways. Lalechet bechol drachav. And the psalmist adds that holy service is related to joy. Ivdu et Hashem b'timcha. Serve God with joy. To emulate the Holy One, to behave in godly ways, is best done with simcha. That's why when we celebrate our festivals, our collective expressions of divine service, we say, Chag Sameach. Of course, the quintessential holiday, Hechad, according to the rabbis, the holiday par excellence, is Sukkot, which is all about joy, V'samachta b'chagecha, but also joy bound up with grief. There's anxiety about rainfall, which means the real possibility of privation. Angst about the very meaning of our lives, which is, I think, why we read Kohelet. Rabbi Ellen Luz suggests when we speak of joy here, we are not speaking of fun. Joy is a deep release of the soul, and it includes death and pain. Joy is any feeling fully felt, any experience we give our whole being to. We are conditioned to choose pleasure and to reject pain, but the truth is, any moment of our life fully inhabited, any feeling fully felt, any immersion in the full depth of life can be the source of deep joy. That is to say, joy is not one thing. Emotions, like humans, are complicated and layered. Avot Rabbi Natan delineates 10 different words for joy, and the Talmud in Masechet Sukkah personifies two of the most common terms, simcha and sason, in a kind of farcical story. Here's the story. There were once two minim, heretics, one called Sason and the other called Simcha. Sason said to Simcha, I am better than you, since it is written about the Messianic era, and similar to our Haftorah from today, actually, they shall attain Sason and Simcha. Simcha said to Sason, I am better than you, since it is written, the Jews had Simcha and Sason in the book of Esther, that we also do at Havdalah. Sason said to Simcha, one day they will take you out and make you a messenger, since it is written, for with Simcha shall they go forth. Simcha said to Sason, one day they will take you out and draw water with you. For it is written, therefore, with Sason you shall draw water. A reference to the Simcha Beit HaShoeva, the water ceremony that was celebrated around Sukkot. And it seems, according to the Talmud, that this absurd disagreement, in fact, led to the infamous Etrog riot of the late Second Temple period. That was a real thing. The Mishnah explains our rabbis taught it once happened that a certain Sadducee poured the water libation over his feet, and all of the people pelted him with their etrogs. But of course, the Gemara is trying to make a serious point. Disagreeing about which is better, Simcha, Sason, is kind of nonsense. They're two sides of the same coin. The 19th century Ukrainian rabbi Malbim teaches that Sason is our external expression of joy, like dancing or playing instruments. Simcha, though, is intrinsic. It's a continual part of our very being, which I think is why Simcha is the most common word for joy, because it's so bound up with fear and with grief. Because external expressions of joy, social media posts from a family vacation, cheering for our team when they score a winning shot or a home run, rocking out at a political convention, these are powerful and important, but they're performative. The joy of Simcha is filtered through our neshamot, our bodies, our very being. It's more like a finely aged wine. It's complex in character, color, and taste. Perhaps that's why wine and simcha are mentioned together in our sources. V'yain yisamach chayim, says Kohelet. Wine brings joy to our lives. V'yain yisamach levav anosh, we read in Tehillim, in Psalms. Wine brings joy to the hearts of men. If joy is, as Rabbi Sachs claims, that which discovers us, perhaps we should view it as the inverse of certain diseases which lie dormant within the human body and occasionally flare up. Simcha is the flare-up of delight we cultivate through holy service. Simcha is the laughter in waiting kept at bay by sadness and life's challenges. Simcha is the muscle we thought was exhausted or atrophied when suddenly we rediscover its strength. And Simcha is the wholeness, the shlemut, that sits with the brokenness we carry. This too emerges from our parsha, whose secrets are revealed in the Midrash. Rav Yosef taught in a Baraita, the verses state, "At that time the Lord said to me, hew for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke, asher shibarta, and you shall put them into the ark," as we heard today. This teaches that both the second set of tablets and the broken pieces of the first set of tablets were placed into the ark. Chavra, we are holy vessels, just like the ark. Containers made of precious materials, holding the precious projection of God's love. It isn't easy to be human, that's to be sure. The world entrusted to us tests us in 1,000 different ways. But joy, to paraphrase Deuteronomy, isn't in heaven. It isn't across the sea. It's right here, seeking us from within, ready to surprise us. Next season might be a bust. But sometimes this one, we realize, might just turn out to be pretty great. Shabbat Shalom.